Hey, what's up, permaculture people? It's Teddy Matson, Seed of Life Permaculture, Design and Landscaping. I recently changed my business name from Seed of Life Sustainable Land Care, so not that that matters too much to you probably, but that's just how I'm going to introduce myself from now on. So I'm just going to do an update on the first Belfast homestead garden. I'm standing here next to the newly constructed compost area. As you can see, it's just some pallets in double wide bins. So, one deep, two wide, heat treated pallets, so there's no chemicals on, so they're food safe. I got 3 bins like that, and here's a pile of horse manure that I'm going to incorporate into the piles as I go to let it rot down slowly and just add to the fertility diversity mix. But the cool thing I did with this is I've had a bag of Stropharia mushroom spawn for about a month now in the fridge, and I know it's kind of late and hot, but excuses. I've been doing a bunch of stuff trying to get things done. So anyways, this is my solution to having some spawn that needed to go in and put it in a cool, shady spot where it would like it. So I threw down a bunch of cardboard in this area and soaked it in the wheelbarrow with water, and then put a 2 or 3 inch layer of wood chips down, and sprinkled 1 5-pound bag from North Spore Stropharia on there, watered that in, and then threw another 2 or 3 inches of wood chips down, watered that in. So the idea is that Stropharia is a pretty tolerant mushroom of fungal competition and bacterial interaction, and is not picky as others about what the substrate is that's growing in. So it's just mixed wood chips. I think it's mostly hardwood, but I know there's some softwood in it too, and it's not very old. It's only a few weeks old. But my thinking of putting in the compost area is that it's already in some shade from this maple tree above it. So it gets dappled sun. I was just here in the afternoon yesterday. It gets sun in the afternoon. But my thinking is these bins with stuff in them will create like microclimates of shade and moisture, and they will have the edges of the compost piles and different materials in here, and the grass just have this diverse place where they can utilize edges, because that's what they do. When you put them in a path around beds, from my experience, they come up basically right on the edge of the path in the bed, so they like this diversity, these options. So hopefully in the fall, if that stays moist and cool enough, and the other thing is I'll be making compost piles and watering them, so I'll be by default watering the mushrooms. So I think by the fall there should be hopefully some good Stropharia coming out of there. So I just wanted to show you the progress on the garden as well. I've got all the seedlings that I bought in, and they're all, I think I've seen like two or three onions that perished from the whole thing, so it's not too bad. So what I'm showing you here is just a bed full of onions where I've gone around with a bucket of compost, some leftover compost I had, and just micro fertilized every single plant, because it's been hot and dry, and I'm hauling water from a hole I dug in a creek in the woods over yonder. It's about 200 steps with two 5-gallon buckets, so it's getting some serious daily, or trying to do it daily. It's been more like every other day or even every other 2 days. Farmer walks. Got to do 8 to 10 trips to water this whole garden, so it's about an hour and a half process of to water, but it's free, abundant water that requires no energy other than my metabolism, so that's pretty cool. So I've just planted these onions. I think there's about 300 altogether in a staggered formation, maybe 6 to 8 inches apart each. So I've had bad luck with growing onions in polycultures in the past, primarily in North Carolina though, and I know they do better in Maine, but I was just trying to just grow them on their own to give them all the space and light and nutrients without competition as possible. So that's why those 2 beds are monoculture onions. But here is the tomatoes on these maple poles with a basil plant in between each one, and then onions on the perimeter. So it's kind of an experiment, seeing the difference between how well they do without any competition and seeing if there's any synergy or at least compatibility with tomatoes and the basil. So here is some hot and sweet peppers spaced quite far apart because that's just how many as I had. And the ring around it, everywhere you see black is just newly applied compost. So the ring around it is all carrots of a few different varieties. And even though I haven't got the fence up around this yet, there's been very minimal chomping from the critters. There was a little digging I saw last night. That's because I planted a bunch of beans. This is also an experiment. I was just seeing how well store-bought beans would do, because we went to the Amish store and got 3 kinds of beans that we eat regularly, and I was like, well, if we eat these a lot, let's just see how well they germinate, see how well that method works. I looked it up. They said if they're not irradiated, you might get 25% germination, you know, but I seeded hundreds of each, so if 25% works, we'll have a lot of beans. So yeah, here's the mixed kale bed, also with onions, and also planted between the onions are beets, and same thing with this pepper bed. There's beets pretty much also planted in a staggered kind of triangular or diamond pattern in both of these 2 beds. So now we're just getting back to the green cabbage, which is doing pretty well considering how hot and dry it's been. There's some yellowing of leaves, some drying up of leaves, but there's also new growth in the middle. They're getting bigger, so they're settling in and accepting their new slightly hostile area, but they're appropriately spaced, probably about 2 feet, giving them plenty of space, and then also interplanted with lots of beets. I am a huge beet fan for the greens and the beets, obviously, and they're good for like juicing. Apparently they're like a workout, pre-workout, like they get you all pumped or whatever. So I thought that was kind of cool. And this is the red cabbage. Our main goal with cabbage is to make kimchi and sauerkraut, so this red cabbage does especially well for staying firm and making the kraut pink, which is more interesting than just pale green. And they seem hardier for growing and tolerating things than the green cabbage usually. They're a little smaller, but they do look healthier in my opinion. And lastly, here's our 18 broccoli plants, which I think half of them were, I forgot what the types were, but one was known to be more heat tolerant than the other. And they seem to be coming out of their initial shock of transplanting too. There's just a couple discolored leaves, but there's also new growth, and they're getting bigger. So, you know, I gave everything this 1 or 2 handfuls of compost right before I'm gonna do the big watering haul to, like, you know, give everything a good fertigation. This is my cardboard pile that I use for sheet mulching. I'll continue to use. Another good thing for the compost bins, not that they're there now, but I can throw cardboard, I can just store stuff in there, lean my tools up against it. It's kind of like an organizational hub. So anyways, that's the garden update. Hope it's informational or educational or somewhere in between. Yeah, cool. Take it easy.